then we're good to go. You're a co-host. So, all right, guys, happy to have you all here in here. We're starting episode 4 already. Today with a quite familiar face for me. So Joerik on this and Rico on here. And without further ado, I will just let Joerik take the screen and help you guys on it. Like I said, it's an interactive one. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself because we want to talk hoops, and I know Joerik loves to talk hoops. So let's get this one started.
All right. So I will give a little talk a little bit about my progression as a skills trainer. So how I started and then how it changed over the years, and then what I'm doing right now. So for me, I love to always experiment. So I'm experimenting with some new stuff right now. But for me, I'm not going to talk 45 minutes and just like Mike said, if you have any questions, I would love to make it interaction. And yeah, I would also love to get feedback on the stuff that I'm experimenting with right now. So I will start a little bit with the history. So 11 years ago, I started going into skills training. So I was 19 at that time, started doing some training some pros for free. So the first things, like I was always looking for mentors. So my first mentor was probably mostly Drew Hanlon, and then the better basketball videos. And yeah, like then was the time that YouTube started coming up. And in the beginning, I was doing simply, I think what most skills trainers were doing at that time, just on-air stuff. And I was lucky that I can train with different age groups during the entire year. So from kids under 12 till pros. But the thing that I was seeing was that my guys looked amazing in practice. Like I was so happy, like when coaches come to practice and they see the skill level, and it was like amazing. And I was super happy with that. But then when we come to the games, I saw that some guys had really easily translated the skills from just doing on-air stuff and just reps on reps, always block practice into the game. For some guys, it was really easy. But I had some other guys who really struggled with, they used the moves at the wrong moment. They made the wrong decisions. And yeah, like I felt like it wasn't working for everyone. And then I think the biggest change for me was when I went to Alex to London with the junior NBA, and then we saw Mike McKay. I don't know if he's in the call. He's even in the call. All right, cool. So he was actually my biggest influencer at that time, and he made me like totally rethink what I was doing for the last 5-6 years. So I've been working a lot more on the game's approach into skills for the last couple of years. But what I'm doing right now, for example, is what I noticed is like, if you have players for 90 minutes, the time they're most locked in is the moment you bring out competition. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to make right now, from the first minute of practice till the last minute, everything is a competition, everything is a game. So if you look, for example, with us in the facility, we have like this black chalk wall. So in the beginning of practice, I would write down all the names of the different players who are in the practice, and every shot that they would make would immediately be with a defender and would immediately be counted as like we keep track of all the scores during the entire game. And for example, how can we do it? It can be super easy. Like if you can combine the skill work into it. So for example, if we would do shooting, I would do some contested shooting, but like we start with some super big advantages. And then after every drill, we build it a little bit up. And then after every series, I do like, for example, you get 2 free throws. And also every free throw would count as an extra score. So what you see then after a practice of like 60 to 90 minutes in the end of the practice, you're going to get scores mostly around 100. So it would mean like my players would have in a skill session of 90 minutes, around 100 makes with a live defender, the best players. And then my worst guys would be around 40 to 50 most of the time. So I think this way it's way more fun to have practice. I feel the guys are way more engaged. And for example, like it's not just the guy who wins at the end of the practice is like the champ. No, I keep a leaderboard. So all the guys who win a practice get like a stripe. So we call it like king of the facility. And definitely in the summer, if you have guys who come every day, it's super cool because the intensity is so good. And what I'm trying to do with my skill work also right now, a lot more than I used to do. I used to do always like 1 rep and then you rotate. So right now what I do a lot more is it's always 3 reps. And after every rep, you get a relocate 3. So because shooting's for us the master skill. So I want my guys to take a lot of 3s. So after every rep, for example, it can be 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. I have as a coach, I get the ball and they need to get immediately out, step into the ball and catch another 3-pointer. And every 3-pointer that they make is also an extra point. And then, for example, I add things like, if you get a water break, you need to earn it. So you never just get the water break. And earning the water break can also give you extra points. So for example, it can be first guy who makes 2-on-2, 3-pointers, gets 5 points, second guy 4 points, third guy 3 points, 2 points, whatever. But just the idea of the practice is that every shot would immediately feel like a game. So for me, it works really well. I think it can still be, I'm trying to address it all the time, but I feel it's really fun to even in the warm-up immediately try to generate some kind of defense, but still give them the option to feel comfortable and get a lot of makes by just making it into a big advantage, for example. Something more that I can, for example, say with it is, I think what changed a lot in my teaching is I speak
Joerik.
a lot.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. So I was receiving questions like, it's great keeping track of everything, but how do you manage or who's managing to keep track of everything while the training is progressing? So are you
I
alone? How do
yeah
you keep track of it? How does it like work and how can you
yeah.
keep
So
everything?
it's super easy actually. So I always say, for example, we do 3 sets of 3 reps, for example, and then they rotate, and they need to always count their makes. But after every set, I give them 2 free throws. And every free throw they score is an extra point. And after the free throws, while they're shooting free throws, I would be standing next to the wall. And if they shot at their 2 free throws, I can write down their score. So you never have a break, you know. So when the last guy shoots his 2 free throws, I write it down and we immediately start the next drill. So it's kind of like after every series in the practice, you will get like 1 minute shooting free throws, and then we write down the scores on the wall, and they can also immediately see it. And what I also do, for example, is the scores on the wall depend while we're getting into 3-on-3, 4-on-4, who's playing with who. So for example, the guy with the highest score, I would put always together with the guy with the lowest score. And then second guy, second lowest. And that's, for example, how we build also our teams at the end of the practice when we do 3-on-3, 4-on-4. So the guys who are at the lowest can, if they play with the best players, they can easily get more points. So I always try to keep the distance as close as possible.
And
The
do you
best,
find do you find that while doing that that you say, okay, I'm putting the first with the last one, that they see, okay, that's how the system works. So I want to play with my buddy that's also a very good player, or how would you like it might be that in the academy that's not how it works, but maybe if other trainers would like to implement the idea, it's like, I know Joerik, so I see he's going for third place and I'm going for fifth place because then we're together. So how would you like counter that one?
I think first of all, they don't have a chance to look that much at the leaderboard because it's going so fast. And second of all, no, you literally see like every shot that they miss, they don't want to miss a single shot, you know. So they're really not looking at, I could play with him. And I think with the kids, it's you see it's really competitive, but even with the pro players, it's even way more because then you get their macho ego stuff. So no, everybody wants to be the king at the end of the court and get that stripe on the wall. So yeah, Mike, you get some more questions about that?
No, that's all good. You can move on from that one for this moment.
Yeah. All right, cool. So something else that I try to do is, if I would work on my skill work, I think something that changed a lot over the years is I talk less. So in my practice, if I have 90 minutes in practice, I literally would maximum talk, I think, 3 or 4 minutes in the entire practice. So what I try to do right now is I try to create games who do the talking for me. So instead of me explaining things, and I try to create situations where they can always figure it out themselves, and where the drill is kind of like the teacher instead of the coach, if that makes sense. So for example, something that I did today was we were with two pro players. I was, for example, doing a shift dribble, and then after the shift dribble, the defensive player was standing on the half circle, and he first needed to have one step inside the paint, and then he can play defense. So now we create that 1 second advantage. And then the guys, they figure it out themselves. So instead of that, we need to do the skill work and work on the different moves. Now we immediately can do it with a 1 second advantage. And they make all the right moves because the defense is always a little bit, out of an advantage. So I think that's something huge that works really good for me. Is literally, instead of talking, try to find drills that do the teaching for you. I think it's way more effective, and then give them more opportunity to figure it out themselves instead of always trying to intervene. And I think another thing, let me see, I wrote down a couple things in here. Something else that I do, for example, in my skill work is instead of, if we work on moves, instead of saying the moves that we're going to work on, I try to give them like constrained freedom, if that makes sense. So for example, it can be same thing today when we did the warm up with the guys. I said, all right, every shot needs to be a fadeaway, but I'm not going to say what kind of fadeaway. So then, for example, one of my pros, he was shooting a lot of things on one leg. Somebody else did a lot of mini fades. Somebody else did a lot of in the post, back to the basket fades. So I try to create constraints, but give them freedom. Another constraint, for example, if we work on finishing, can be you need to finish extended. But there are a lot of moves how you can finish extended, out of the shoulder, out of your cylinder. Or it can be, for example, give me any kind of soft touch out of the half circle. So things like that, I think, helps my players to really create their own style instead of me trying to say, these are the moves you need to have in your game. And does that mean, for example, that I wouldn't show all the moves still to my players? No, I still do it. But if I do it, for example, it would be, if I would still do my block practice, I would go for very minimum reps. So for example, if I would still want to show my whole package, for example, let's say floaters, I would only go for 2 makes each move, and then we immediately go to the next. And then you can show the whole package in like 5 to 6 minutes, and the rest of the practice can be games. Instead of, for example, if I would look back 5 years ago, it would be 50 minutes working on the moves, and then maybe 20 minutes working on games.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
you're if you're talking about that, and indeed, then you're moving on. So you're developing the skills practice, as you say, right? Now we're not doing the block practice anymore, but you say you're building it up from saying we're going to do fadeaways to showing them how to do correct fadeaways after they have experienced doing it themselves. And do you also use video in it, or like if you put in a timeline of a practice, like really into, okay, we're going to do fadeaways, but what if somebody like is doing always one-legged fadeaways, but the technique they're doing is not correct, and you see that the technique is not correct, like at one point, at what point and how do you correct it?
Yeah, so I think it's a mix. So for example, the stuff what I'm talking about right now are for me the guys who already learn everything, you know. So it's more like under 18 or under 21 or pro players, the guys who already seen the whole details package. Then I would not go anymore into too much details, but more give them freedom and let them figure it out themselves. So I wouldn't, for example, if I have 6 guys and I see one guy um, like not doing the fadeaway correct, I wouldn't immediately stop the practice and do that. I think it would be more, for example, after the practice, I take him and we do 5 minutes extra on that part. But it's, of course, it's different if I would have under 16 guys who still need to do it. Then if I, for example, need to teach something for the first time, I always start with video. So I first show the video where I show everything. Then I get on the court, and then I would break it down into a different series. But as soon as they got the basics, I would immediately go into the games. For me, it felt like it's way more efficient. And I think a lot of times we focus, or me in the past, I focused too much on getting the details perfect. And then if I look, for example, at NBA games or I look at EuroLeague games, and you see a lot of guys using the moves in the game, but it's also not a lot of times perfect, you know? Everybody get their own style. So I stepped a little bit away of chasing perfection on moves and more going into what works for a player instead of it needs to look like that. I think if when you are going for it needs to look like that, it's more your own ego that you're trying to get, like, I teach them that, instead of right now I think more like every player has their own style, and I try to look what can work for in his style, for example, and not like my I want my layups to look like this, or he needs to have that in his package.
Yeah. And so like now you're really, and also because of COVID, of course, you're really focused on that small group sessions in which you're allowed to train them. But looking at the bigger picture, that if we're allowed to do everything again, we have the availability of having multiple coaches on different levels within the facility and within the academy. But we also have coaches out here that might have a full team for all practices. So with 10 to 12 to 15 people on it, guys, girls, boys, men's, whatever you want to teach. Like, how would you do skill sessions with like that amount of people and still give them valuable reps, so to say? Not saying that we want to have it block practice, but valuable reps in skills work.
Yeah, to be honest, I wouldn't say it's any different. For example, yesterday I was giving, no, 2 days ago I was giving an outside session, and normally in Belgium there were 10 players allowed. I don't know if you saw it on Instagram, Mike, but we had, I think it was 18 players. So I was giving on 2 courts the session, and it's, if I would have 4 players or I would have 18 players, my session was pretty much the same actually. I try to also immediately, I give them, within 10 minutes constraints with freedom. So for example, it can be also a mix between block practice and freedom. For example, we say, we started working on footwork. So I would say, all right, you need to start with a rocker step. And then after the rocker step, you're going to give me any kind of finish you want. or it can be we need to finish with some kind of extended finish, but you're gonna give me anything you want before that. So some players were doing off the dribble, some players were using footwork. So you can combine block practice also with giving constraints. And I don't have to teach them. I give them, a lot of the times players are creative enough to try new things, and they watch games. They watch games of their favorite players also. So they, a lot of the times they have way more creativity than we think. And it's just a question of giving them the option to, yeah, get to know themselves and get to know their playing style. And yeah, they get more in their package than we, a lot of times I think as coaches think. So you don't always need to give them the full package. Yeah.
Yeah, and so right now you're at a level that you're competent enough to say, okay, today we might change it up a bit, and we might just focus on this instead of that. If you're going into practice or like in practice itself, but where do you find your like your knowledge right now or your drive to keep going and keep developing stuff to the
Mm-hmm.
next level?
So I think one rule that I have that helped me a lot is I need to do one new drill every practice. So that's something that I've been doing for 11 years now, is every practice I try to come up with something new. And I try. I'm never afraid to experiment. And yeah, sometimes it sucks and it sucks, and sometimes it's amazing. But I think my biggest drive right now is using, or what I learn a lot from is using social media to get, for example, like for me, I'm not following my friends on social media. The players are always asking me, coach, can you follow me? No, I don't follow any of my players.
By
I
the way,
only,
it took him over a year to follow me, guys, so I
yeah,
know this feeling.
yeah. And I still put you on mute. No, it's not. No, but for me, what I do, I'm on Instagram, for example, I follow only basketball trainers. So every time that I open something and I check my feed, I get inspired. And I think getting inspired also works two ways. I thought about this like yesterday. Sometimes you see something from somebody that I can build me like what works also, So you can,
I
I
think,
think getting inspired can work both ways. It can,
yeah, Jorik.
yeah,
So
Mike.
I don't know if it's my connection or your connection, but on my stream you're frozen. So I don't know if it's my connection or
All right. What
oh,
did
it
you
was good.
get?
Oh, so it was all so it was all my fault. Okay, no, please continue. But it might
All
be
right.
that it's on the recording as a total blur though.
Yeah. So I still try to learn new things every day, but I'm not that obsessed anymore as I was in the beginning of my first 7 years. I think there can also be something as doing too much research. I think I had that. Like, yeah, you need to find a balance between trusting your own style, I think, and trying to see what works for you, and still doing research. Because I think in the beginning, if you're new to coaching, you find so much information online, but that doesn't mean it works for you. You need to find your own, yeah. You need to find your own style where you feel comfortable with. Yeah.
Yep. No, no, no. And that's um like I think the biggest thing for like skills coaching in general is that okay, we're going to develop, but at one point where when are we going to like really up the ante, so to say, and go to the next level as to when do we value a connection with somebody and when can we learn from it. So like how do you build connections with other people and when, like maybe a hard question, when do you stop connecting to someone?
When you stop connecting, how do you mean? Like,
Like right now that person is not going to help me to get to another level. So for example, last week we had Charlie Haynes, who was with EA or visited EA last year.
mhm.
He was saying like on Twitter I only follow people that I know can have a real impact on me as a coach. But at one point, do you like stop connecting with people that don't really give you that value? Or haven't you experienced something like that?
Oh yeah, I think I'm like my intuition is already I'm not the most social guy. I always like to be alone and just be by myself. So I'm not the guy who immediately would connect all the time. I don't need that. But I think on social media it's really easy because you just click on follow. So on that part it's easy. But I do feel like there's something as talking too much about the game also, because yeah you I think if you speak to so many people, it just gets in your head, and I do believe that there is something like you you can't do good for everyone, and there is not the right way to do it. I still believe that even a lot of the stuff is maybe science based. I still believe there are many ways to get there, and yeah, every coach has their own style, and what works for them might not work for you, but you need to find the people who connect with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a question from Manlik. Actually, great question. So I let him ask it himself.
Hey, Joerik, nice to meet you. My name's Menelik Fernandez. Pleasure. Thanks for taking your time. So my question's, I guess, a three-part question. It goes back to the implementation of a new drill every practice. I've been in environments of both where somebody's constantly introducing new things, and I've been in like really regimented blocked type drills. With
Mhm.
you, do you feel that it's a three-part question, I'm sorry. Do you feel that the new drill every practice is well received by your guys?
Mhm.
Second part, do you alternate between blocked random type of drill when you're introducing new things? And then lastly, would you recommend this approach for coaches who, like, what comes to mind instantly is the situation that I'm in where it's a small college and we're very seriously time constrained with the amount of time we can get in on
Mhm.
the floor, and we're still trying to be in a competitive environment. Would you recommend doing it in a similar environment to the one that I'm describing?
Yeah. So first of all, do you find a new drill in every practice is well received? Yes, because they never know it's a new drill. Like what if you're doing this for so long, your package becomes bigger and bigger, and they don't know if it's a new drill or an old drill. So they're as long as you engage them, they will be hungry. So for me, what I see, like what works is I look at the player's eyes. If their eyes are like fire, then I keep it. If their eyes are not fire, I might even totally change my practice. So I can give you a really good example is Mike knows this guy. We get the biggest talent in Belgium is our point guard, Retino Baswan. And he did Alabama, G League. He had like a lot of NBA invites. He was the only Belgian guy who ever came so close to signing NBA contract. And he comes from a very traditional way of training, where it's only block practice. So he did all the American colleges, and every summer he did the off season also in there. And me, I'm more all into this games approach now. So when he comes to my practice in off season, I was like, oh, I made the perfect practice for him. We're gonna work on all kind of things that he would do in the game, and I saw on his face that he didn't like what was stuff that we were doing. And during like a water break in the middle of the session, he said like, Yuri, can we just please just do, I just want to do like 6 reps of everything. And that's where I feel comfortable with. And that works for me. So I try to convince him like, no, every rep is different. We always get something random. It's always a different scenario. It's with live defenders. It's gonna help you a lot more. And he didn't want to do it. So, but he's the best player in the country, and that works for him. So then in the middle of the practice, I change and I throw my paper into the garbage can, and I say, all right, we're gonna do what works for you if that's what feels comfortable. So I do feel like you need to check, for example, with during the practice, you get a feeling. You as a coach, you get a feeling like, do my players like what I'm doing or not? And I think you have to follow that feeling and try to see what gets them most engaged. Do you alternate between a blocked and random type of drill? No, absolutely not. So if I would do blocked, it would only be now the first maybe 20 minutes, definitely not longer than that. And even right now, I would say with my guys who are already 16 and older, it would be maybe the first 5 minutes, only the warm up. And then I would immediately start keeping things random, or I try to combine both. I think that's something that not a lot of coaches do. For example, let's say you work on footwork again, you say, you do a jab step and we're gonna go for 4 makes, but it needs to be 4 different kind of finishes or shots. You can mix it up. So I do think you can mix block and random also. Lastly, would you recommend this approach? Yes, because for example, today also at Jonas Fuchs, another one of my pro guys, and he has a game tonight. And for example, he only comes in for 25 minutes, and we do 25 minutes of random and blocked mixed, and we just do the stuff that he does in the game, and that's enough. He says that's enough. He comes 2 times a week for 25 minutes, and he says it works for him. So I don't think it would take that much time to do skill work. I would even say like even 15 minutes of skill work once or twice a week can make your players better. I think it's just a question of being efficient in what you teach.
So that's great because you have actually players from all different teams from an academy also joining this call, Joerik. So they're now expecting 15-minute skill sessions from you.
All right. Something else, Mike, that you think that could be interesting?
Yeah. So actually, we're going.
Thank you, Joerik.
Oh yeah, we're going into the final 10 minutes, so I definitely want to keep an open mic for this one. And actually, as I see a lot of some players from the academy in here as well, like feel free to unmute yourself and share experiences on how you feel this has impacted you opposed to other teams, because this is a great way to share your opinion as well if you want to, guys. And yeah, I just want to keep an open mic for other trainers as well. And if not, I will fire some different questions at you, but I certainly know that there should be any questions coming out here. So feel free to unmute yourself, guys.
Maybe something else I can say that I'm experimenting a lot with is shooting on one leg. I think that's what I'm doing a lot with some of my pro guys right now. And because I feel like shooting on one leg is, for example, like a one leg side step is something that your shot is way faster than if you do it on 2 legs. So, and something else that I'm doing a lot is like, what can you, for example, how can you experiment with finishing way more different types of finishes on just doing one step? So that's something that I'm teaching already with mini basket to our guys. Is same thing. We give them a lot of freedom also to try new things. But like, all right, can you jump from way further from the basket and just only use one step? Things like that. And I feel like that's also something like, as we as coaches, or me as a coach, I always thought like, oh, one step and same foot, same hand. Those are things that's, you have to have really good movement patterns for that. That's really tough. But what I see is that kids are so fast learning that kind of things that the things what used to look crazy or really not normal, you can make normal if you'll just let the kids do it from a young age. So that's something that we also do a lot more now, is with the younger groups already do like same foot, same hand finishes. Also, like, can you finish outside of your cylinder? If you look at an NBA game, and I did this, I think last week, I looked at just, what was it, a game of the Warriors, and then I put stripes every time it was an extended finish. And because I just want to see like how many times do people use it in the game. And I counted 22 times. So 22 finishes were extended in one game. but you don't see almost none of the coaches work on it. But if you think about it, like if you can finish extended, it can be on 2 feet, it can be on one foot, same hand, it can be alternate, whatever. But it's just so much harder to contest a finish. So those are things that I feel like, shit, we need to work way more on that kind of stuff. So that's how, for example, how I do my skill work is to see what I think we need to work most on. A lot of times I just see NBA games, and I put every time that somebody gets a make, I put a stripe on what kind of basket was it. Was it a mini fade? Boom. Same thing. How many mini fades do you see in a game? Almost every shot out of the dribble has some kind of fade with it. If you see step backs, almost all the step backs at the highest level has some kind of fade with it. So those are things that I think you should already bring in with kids from like under 16, stuff like that. We already, with Mike's team, for example, we already worked on, yeah, can you fall a little bit back on every shot? And in the beginning, they struggle with it, but it goes real fast that they, yeah,
And then
that they can apply stuff like that.
And I tell them not to do it in games. No.
I have a question, Mike.
Yes, go ahead, John.
Mike, first of all, thanks for your invitation. Thanks for bringing us so much great Zoom webinars about basketball, Euro basketball, NBA, first of all. Second of all, Joerik, thanks for your time. I have a question for you, Joerik. Normally, you say everything what you're doing, like I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm preparing this, I'm a kind of coach like this. But what kind of skills practice or skills training you are not? So what kind of things you are not doing, or what kind of organization you are not? That's a kind of unusual question, but
yeah. So what I would say that what the guy that I'm not is the guy who talks all the time and who's trying to correct everything. So I'm the guy who you look at my practice and you see me talking for just 2 or 3 minutes in an entire practice. That's it. And so I'm really not the guy who talks a lot. I'm really not the guy who's gonna, how do you say it? I'm the guy who want to give a lot of freedom. So I'm not the guy who says it needs to be like this. I stepped away from that part. I'm not the type of guy who does a lot of ball handling practice. I stepped away from ball handling. That's also maybe some really big difference. If you look at me in the beginning, I was like, oh yeah, ball handling and stationary ball handling and all those things. I think the best thing came from a conversation I had with Jacht from All Day Athletes in the Netherlands. And he said, I think the best ball handling drill is playing one-on-one. And I 100% agree with him. Like, I don't do ball handling anymore. It would be a drill that immediately would have a live defender and things like that. So for example, yesterday, I just uploaded it on the online platform. We did a drill that I called like pipeline one-on-one. So you start somewhere at mid-court and you need to stay between the elbows, but you only can change hands 2 times. So you can only do 2 change of directions and you need to create some kind of opportunity. But now you see, for example, like that's a lot of pressure because you don't have a lot of space, but it's really going to challenge players to be efficient with their dribbles and still, yeah, try to create something like under pressure. So yeah, I know Paul likes the pipeline name.
thanks for your answer, man. Thanks for your answer. You appreciate it.
Yeah. So Paul is great on having like words, and I know he calls something like the pipe or stuff like that. So he's great on those. He's great on those stuff. Well, we got 2 more questions, Joerik. So the first one is from Michael Doffman. If I'm pronouncing it correctly, feel free to unmute yourself and ask it yourself, Coach.
Hi guys. So how do you incorporate random practice or into your workouts where it's only with one other person? So yeah, I think it's quite easy to do small-sided games in a group, but something which I've been challenging myself is how can I make it random when it's only me and one other player?
Yeah, I think actually it's really easy to make it random, but it's focused a lot of creativity. For example, I'm just gonna say a couple of things that I would do. So again, this morning, this pro guy that I only had for 25 minutes. So we start and I say, all right, give me any kind of catch and shoot, but always different footwork. You can't do the same thing twice. So you can use a hop, you can do a 1-2, we can do on the catch a sidestep. Then we say, all right, give me any kind of shot mid-range, but you only have one dribble. Then it can be, all right, you give me any kind of fadeaway, but it needs to be on two feet. And everything would be 9 reps, 7 to 9 reps. Everything needs to, and then next up, all right, any kind of shot, one leg. Any kind of shot where you need to open up mid-range and you start back to the basket. Any kind of shot where you come from a lateral movement. Any kind of touch, step back or touch side step. So you need to create a half-meter separation. All right. Then, for example, it would be ball screen. I would give him some kind of read up, and we go for 9 makes, anything on ball screens. And then, for example, it can be any kind of, you need to make your decision in a split second, and he just goes from a closeout, stuff like that. So I think you can easily make things random. And you can also, for example, make it mixed. So what I do a lot is you need to take a catch and shoot tree, and then you make something random, for example, after that. So you mix up the things that you want him to do most. His catch and shoot trees is probably the most important skill in the game right now. And then, for example, you mix it up with giving some constraints with freedom.
Perfect. We got 3 more questions before we're going ahead with the other stuff. We got a question from Mike, from Michael, and from Bjorn. The first one was from Mike McKay. I don't know if you're able to unmute Mike and ask him yourself.
Hello, Joerik. So I'll ask the question. So you've given a task constraint and you're working, let's say it's your extension layups, and you see that the athlete has their own movement solution to the problem that you presented them, which I love. What's required for you to consider it an error? And if so, are you going to stop it immediately and do some kind of correction? Or are you going to let them play through it and hope they change, or is there ever an error?
I would say if it works, I would let them play through it. And maybe sometimes what I do is I would give them the advice and try it this way. But if I feel like it doesn't feel natural to them, I wouldn't change it. Would there be an error? I would say only if it doesn't work. So if it works, I would just keep it that way. But if it doesn't work, then I would correct it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, perfect. Thanks. And the second one is from Michael. So I don't know. I think he's able to unmute himself as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So yeah, when you work with athletes, do you work on perceptual cues or read drills where it helps them as, again, an on-ball or off-ball defender, reading whether it's hand position or players' hips and knees, or are there perceptual cues that might help them play defense or steal the ball?
To be honest, I think that's my biggest weak point would be defense. I'm always focused on offense. So to be honest, I don't really teach the defense. The only way I teach the defense would be if I would use guided defense. That's the only time. That's something I learned from Mike, is then I try to teach, really try to drill the defense to make it more challenging and game-like for the offense. But would there be perceptual cues for defense? No, I think something that I like to do is reward the offense. And I think if you reward the offense, then defense automatically is going to go up and try to do more their best, if you get what I mean. But to be honest, I put all my attention on offense. And I do feel that it works. I do feel like defense gets better because I try to make players offensive better. if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then the next one is from Bjorn. I know he's in here as well.
Yeah, Joerik, thanks for your time.
Right.
This has already been awesome. So my question is, and this probably applies to the players that you take in the off season. Say you have them for 4 weeks. How do you gauge how high to set their goals, and how do you know what time frame it's going to take for them to achieve that goal?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's a bit of a paintbrush statement because different things take different amount of time. But how would you judge that?
Yeah, so I would say always in the beginning of the off season, we make some kind of like SWOT analyze, and I would say we only focus on 2, maximum 3 main goals. What I think is with the amount of time, depending, I think you can always focus on 2, 3 goals. Even if you only have 2 sessions with them or 1 session, I still think you can try to make them improve on that part. But it's kind of like this is the biggest thing that's going to help you. And I'm always going to work more on strengths than on weaknesses. So I think I had a good Zoom call with 2 of our guys, and they explained it perfectly. We would always say we work 70% on our strengths and 30% on weaknesses. Of course, it depends, like, is the weakness, for example, if I would have Giannis Antetokounmpo and you would say his weakness is shooting, of course, that's something that he needs to work on because it's bad for his game right now. But if the weakness, for example, let's say same thing, the guy I had this morning, he said my weakness is playing pick and roll, but he maybe get 1 pick and roll in every 3 games. Yeah, I'm maybe gonna focus 1 practice on it with you, or probably not more than that, because you're the type of guy who comes over screens or stays in the corner and does everything with maximum 1 or 2 dribbles. So we're gonna focus more on that part. So I think it depends on your guys. But how do you know how high to set goals? I think the goal setting should be more from the player. I think that's more efficient than you're just a tool. As a trainer, you're the tool to make him reach his goals. I think, yeah.
Yeah. So I just got approval from Enrico to go a little bit beyond time, if you're okay with that, because it's funny to see that if you say we're going into the last minutes, that people start firing questions away. And I don't want to keep people with unanswered questions. So the next one is from a person you know very well. And I'm going to I'm going to ask him to unmute himself and ask it to you. Mr. Deacon, go ahead.
Yeah, hi coach. It's Deacon here. So I got a question about like play style and base of how to play the basketball game. You know me, I'm always trying to improve my game and trying to find my own play style. But is there like a base of that like everybody needs? Like I know you'll say shooting is at number 1, but what is like your top 5 things that you definitely need to play at a high level?
All right. So actually, when I was talking about everybody have their own play style, I had a lot of you in mind because, for example, you're one of the guys who have a very different play style than most other players. So it's a really good question. Of course, like my top priority is you need to be really good in catch and shoot threes. That's the number 1 goal I would have with every player. It doesn't matter if you're 2 meters 10 or you're a little point guard. So I would say definitely that would be number 1. Then I think what else that I think everybody should have is footwork. So footwork is something that I focus on a lot. So it can be anything from like rip throughs, jab steps, rocker steps, those kind of things I think every player should have. Then something that I teach also to every player is a soft touch, because the same thing is if I know a lot of coaches, they don't like floaters or they're not huge on it, but same thing, watch an NBA game and put stripes every time you see a soft touch, and it's also going to be around 15 to 20 at least. So that's something that I would definitely teach also to everyone. Let me think, something else that I'm teaching. Yeah, of course, touch. Work a lot on touch, you know that. Both hands. Um, Fourth, and I think the fifth one, it would be passing, because that's also a skill I think that's very underrated and not a lot of coaches work on it. But if every player in your team can pass the ball really well, that's a huge difference. So I would say that would be my top 5 then. Yeah.
So another player of ours, Dante, is asking why not footwork, or why is footwork not in this one?
I said footwork. I said that the second one was footwork. Come on, Dante.
You better listen up, Dante. All right, Paul. We got Paul and Diogo's question next up, and after that, I'm going to round up the talk with Joerik as well, because we're going a little bit over time, and then I'm going to have to quote Menelik on this as saying, "I only asked a certain amount of time for you, but we're going a little bit over the limit." So, Paul, please feel free to unmute yourself, man.
Hey, Joerik. Quick one. So in terms of going back to what Mike said in terms of errors, instead of jumping right in, you use questioning to see if the players can recognize their errors first before offering. I know as a young coach, I was very much jumping, fix, boom, 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 boom. Whereas now I think offering questions for them to elicit the answer or potentially correct the error. Is that something that you guys do? And how receptive are the players to that? And what is the speed of improvement from their self-recognition as opposed to you offering definitions?
That's actually also a huge thing that I learned from Mike McKay. So in the beginning, I think in my early years, I was already doing it a little bit, but without really knowing it. But now I never try to give the answer right away. So I always ask questions, and I do feel like it helps so much. So yeah, I'm 100%, using the stuff like that Mike teach me on that part. And also I think something that I learned from him is, instead of always just asking the question to your entire team, it's always going to be the same guys who have their hand up and who want to say it. So just learn to just cold pick them and just say like, all right, I try to get the shy guys to talk. And I feel like that works really well with our guys. And you really see, not just like when they're in the huddle, there's always crazy focus now, because they know that there might be some kind of question coming. So that's also one thing else that I think can improve on that part. And just if a kid gives the right answer, like you give him a high five or something, and his day is already great, like he's going with a smile at home. So I think also as a coach, it's a great way to build a really good relationship with your players. So yeah, definitely.
All right, I got one more question. Sorry, 1.5 more question, because I forgot one question. That's skills NBA, skills Euro League.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
I would say NBA, because it's more freedom, and I think I did this on a call with By Any Means Basketball 2 weeks ago. So he asked me what's the difference between NBA or American basketball and Europe. So I think in Europe we make way more decisions on the catch, and in the NBA it's a lot more ISO and way more dribbles. So I think in the beginning, that's also something big that I changed. In the beginning, I was teaching all these ISO moves and what you see with James Harden and all that kind of stuff. So I totally stepped away from that, because it doesn't fit in our play style. That was something, for example, that I learned from Alex Arama. Like, he was like, yeah, that's really good, but maybe only 2 players in the entire team are gonna use that. So that was something that I definitely learned from him, and that I changed in my, in the way I develop players right now. It's, you try to be as efficient as possible, and you try to give them everything you work on in practice should immediately have transferred to the game, I think. Yeah.
All right, Diogo, my man, you're up. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, man. Hi, Joerik. Hope you're doing well. I think you kind of explained about it, but regarding the working on the improving weaknesses or the strengths, like, is it based on age, or when do you start focusing more on improving the strengths rather than just the overall package?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I didn't really explain that. So for me, I would say everything under 16 is what I would say I try to get my players amazing at the basics. So everything under 16, I'm doing everything the same for every player. And then when they're older than 16, I try to look like what are your strengths, what type of player can you become, what's going to help you in the future. So more individualization and specialization when they're over 16, and under 16 I would do the same for everyone. You just try to get them basic amazing, how we call it.
Thank you.
All right, the last one I'm going to ask you to answer this one in three sentences. Junior academy players, you have to teach them a layup. You have three sentences to explain them how to do a layup. How would you go at it? Because we're talking about pros, we're talking about high-level players. What about people that aren't used to playing basketball and you have to explain them how to do a layup?
First I would just do a demo and see how they do, because I don't think you need to break it down if maybe some of them can already do it.
All right. No, perfect. No, Joerik, thank you for jumping on. Thank you for some extended time as well. And